Hey guys, Kevin here. So today I watched television news for the first time in a long time. In fact, I watched more television news today than I usually watch in a whole month. And for obvious reasons. I mean, the propaganda is just so bad. And so I watch these stories and I start deconstructing them in my head, thinking about what lies they're telling us. And I watched these two stories today and they were very different. They had nothing to do with each other. But after watching these two different stories, I felt compelled to make this video. And here's why. So the first story I saw today was about these kids. These kids who are walking out of class, leaving school, because they want to protest our Second Amendment rights. Or at least that's how the media is framing it. The media is framing it as this organic movement, and these kids are just fed up with us do-nothing adults who are not as enlightened as they are, not as progressive as they are. And it's completely false, right? These kids, the movement is not organic. It's the same usual suspects from the left funding this movement. It's people like Dina Katz from the Women's March on Washington who are paying for the permits for these anti-gun marches. It's Mayor Bloomberg and his organization, Everytown, who are out there making these PSAs and these advertisements. And CNN is there picking these kids, these antifa wannabe kids. They're finding the ones who are willing to push their agenda, and they're silencing those who don't want to push their agenda. So none of this is organic. But the media is also acting like these kids are so much more enlightened than all of us, and that bothers me. First of all, when you're that young, your frontal lobe hasn't developed yet. Okay, you're not capable of making really well-thought, logical arguments or decisions. And it's not being insulting, it's just the truth. That's why you see these kids get so emotional when somebody makes an argument against them that sticks. When somebody brings logic to the table like Dana Loesch did or like Marco Rubio did, they want to get aggressive and be bullies in their response. And so, look, the media is touting these kids in Florida, right? These public school kids in Florida as experts on gun policy. First of all, it's a public school in Florida. Second of all right, yes, there were kids who died, and that's sad. But these kids are not qualified to speak about gun policy because a few friends of theirs died. Lots of kids have friends who die from drunk driving accidents. But kids are not allowed to buy alcohol, just like kids are not allowed to buy guns. So would we expect kids to be the ones to lead a debate on alcohol prohibition? It's a perfect example of how prohibition does not work. And so is this on guns. Anyway, enough about these kids, right? I just saw these kids and I saw the way the media was talking about these kids and it upset me. But what really made me think was the next thing I saw. And I changed the channel and there's Trump on television talking to a base full of Marines. And this made me think about the one time I skipped school, the one time I walked out of class. Well, actually, there were two times, but the first time was to be with a girl I was friends with, and, that's different. There was one time I left school and walked out, and that was on September 11th of 2001. And seeing those young Marines reminded me of that. Seeing these kids walking out, I thought about what it took to make me walk out of school. I didn't walk out of school after Columbine happened. I didn't walk out of school after they blew up the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, even though that was a bigger outrage than any of this stuff that's happened on our public school campuses lately. The one event that got me to walk out of school was September 11th, and that's because I walked out of school and I went and signed up to join the Army. And so watching these kids who are not any different from these kids marching and leaving class to protest the Second Amendment. Sure, these Marines might be a few years older, 2 or 3 years older. You have 18 and 19-year-old Marines. You have kids at these protests who are probably 16, 17. Okay, 2 years age difference. But a world apart in maturity, a world apart in ideology and principle. These Marines are the best this country has to offer. And they were respectful. They're listening to Trump. And Trump told them, this country appreciates you. We don't appreciate those kids marching against our Second Amendment rights. They don't represent us, but those Marines do. And I tell you, that's the kind of people we should be rooting for in this country. I do not root for these kids who are marching on Washington to take away our Second Amendment rights when they themselves have no business talking about gun control, gun policy. I would much rather those Marines who are 18 and 19 but carry an automatic rifle on base with 3,000 other armed Marines, right? When I was in Iraq, I was only 19 years old, and I carried a gun, automatic weapon, on a base with 3,000 other 18 and 19-year-olds. And not one incident of violence outside maybe a drunken brawl. It just didn't happen. And that's the difference between Republicans and Democrats. I often think about this. Democrats always project. They don't trust themselves with guns, so they don't want you to have a gun. They don't trust themselves to be responsible, so they think you have to have a nanny state. And it disgusts me. And it disgusts me that these kids are walking out of class when most of these kids can barely read. You know, we have record low proficiency scores in math and English right now in a lot of these big cities, and it's a shame. And instead of focusing on the sciences and mathematics, these schools are focusing on social justice. It's even on a lot of the websites for these schools. We focus on social justice, or we have a commitment to diversity. They should be committed to math and science. They should be committed to learning reading and arithmetic. So I start thinking about these two different groups of kids. I start thinking about my life and the directions it's gone. Then I think about my daughter's future and the future of America. Who do we want to inherit this country? Who do we want to pass on the fruits of our labor to? In the left corner, we have these kids who want to throw a temper tantrum every time something doesn't go their way, who feel like they are entitled to everything, who demand people in authority listen to them and do what they want, and anybody who disagrees with them is pro-child death, and they can just bully them and talk down to them because they're more enlightened than we are. Those kids who will be living in their parents' basement till they're 30, who will never fully integrate into our workplace, who will always blame racism or patriarchy for their problems instead of their own lack of initiative. So do we give America to those kids? Or do we give America to the kids in the right corner? The kids out there on that military base, the ones who at 17, 18, 19, the same age as many of these kids in Washington and marching out of these schools, those kids are out there starting their own life, working on their own, ambitious, going to school while they serve in the military full time, working hard. The kids who are sitting respectfully while the president speaks, not presuming to know more than he does or more than the American people do. The kids who trust themselves to handle a fully automatic weapon of war and know that they're not going to go out and just kill a bunch of people with it. Or at least not the good guys, right? I mean, hell, we hope they kill a few people with it if they're in a war. But you know what I mean. Those are the kids I want to inherit our future. Those are the kids that I entrust to look after my daughters when I'm older. And, you know, I hope those kids the best. I wish them the best. I hope these other kids fail horribly. And that's where we are right now, guys. That's where we are. We need to make the decision of which side we want to stand by. Which group better represents our nation's future. Because one is bringing us down a very dark, bad path. And the other will bring us to salvation. So one more thing. God bless President Trump for giving credit to those young men and women who served today. He was a class act in San Diego. And thankfully, he did not waste one breath talking about these spoiled brats marching on Washington right now. Guys, check out my two channels, Patriot Punk on YouTube and InfoWars Stop the Purge on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook. I'm Kevin Cormier. And on Twitter at The Great Commie S. It's supposed to say Great Commie Slayer, but I couldn't fit it all in there. I didn't realize till after I saved it. So it's just The Great Commie S. Anyway, I'm out. Later. Oh yeah, check out Dapperton's Liberty Network. I always forget to do that.